The world of agriculture education podcast is growing and growing. This is Talk Ag to Me. Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Breanna, and in today's episode, we actually have two special guests, a very rare sight on Talk Ag to Me. However, these two guests are the co-hosts of an ag education-based podcast called Here by the Owl. And both of these guests are ag teachers in northern United States, and their podcast is dedicated to providing resources to other ag teachers around the country. Now, there's a lot more fun to be had, but I'm going to leave that to the episode itself. Once again, thank you all for listening and for tuning in. Don't forget to share, like, subscribe, do all the things, follow and all that. And as we always say, don't just share it online, but share it with your friends and family around the dinner table or anywhere else you're at. The Patreon is always there, so don't feel obligated, but it is always appreciated when it is donated too. That being said, that's all I have for you today. So thank you all so much, and here's the episode. Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Breanna, and in today's episode, we're talking all about ag education-based podcasts. And if you guys know anything about me by now, you know that's a soft spot in my heart. So to talk about this topic, I have two hosts of an ag education-based podcast, actually what I would say one of the most popular ag education-based podcasts, Nikki and Breanna. Am I pronouncing that right? Okay. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, but yeah, go ahead and take it away, guys.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having us. I'm Nikki Fiddle-Doll. I am one of the hosts of Here by the Owl podcast, and I spent 9.5 years in the classroom teaching 8th through 12th grade agricultural education. In August, I transferred out of the classroom, and my current role is supervisor of agricultural education and state FFA advisor in North Dakota.
Hi, I'm Breanna Pastor, and I am the other host of Here by the Owl podcast. I am starting my 5th year, or it's halfway through my 5th year of teaching agriculture education and being the FFA advisor for 7th through 12th grade students in Wahpeton, North Dakota.
Awesome. And so I got connected to you guys through a friend of mine who was a guest on your guys' show, Jason Ferreira.
We love him.
Okay. I'm glad he's a friend of mine. So I'm want to make sure we're on good terms here, but he's fantastic.
I should have been like, oh, him? No.
No, I had him on the show recently. I help coach a lot of his teams. I actually just got done with job interview practice with him a couple days ago. So he's phenomenal. I'll start my student teaching in a couple of semesters. And so he's already like, hey, when you start, I want you to be at my school. Like, you're going to be my student teacher. I was like, okay. So
that's awesome. Oh, you're going to love student.
I'm a little jealous that you get to possibly student teach with him. We were just in Kentucky with him last weekend. So.
Oh, nice. You guys were there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
He told me all about his excursion. He was very tired when he got back.
Well, when you're having that much fun, we did an escape room, and learned a lot. And so, we've met Jason through, what was the initial? We work as a National FFA teacher ambassadors together, but we met prior to that. And now it's like we've known each other forever. And I think he's just like, he could be like the third Here by the Owl podcast host. Like we just all mesh well, and he's so great. And I love, it's such a small world, the connections that we have. So yeah,
no, he's fantastic. I got connected to him through a friend of mine who was one of his students. She came back to help him coach some creed practices, and they were having the hardest time with a couple of their students. So they reached out to me because they knew that I had been coaching. So I did extemp when I was an FFA, but once I graduated, I started coaching my chapter's extemp team. So I've been coaching extemp for 4 years now. And they called me up. They were like, hey, we have a creed kid that we need help with. Can you come in and listen to him? Just kind of put him through the ringer. And I was like, sure. So I come down there and I started, giving him my spiel on, like, this is what you could do better. This is what you're doing good on, like, how it goes, like the coaching methods. Yeah. And Ferrer just sitting there staring at me. He's like, what chapter did you say you were from again? And I told him, I was like, I'm from Tulare. And he's like, who'd you say your mentor was? And I'm sure you guys know Mr. Coolwine. But I mentioned him and he was like, I knew it. He's mine too. And so we like instantly were like, because, you know, we had same advisors. So we had the exact same, like, you know, he's like, I knew you sounded familiar. You have the exact same words that he does. And so like for years now, I've been helping him with his teams. And when his chapter was starting up a podcast, he reached out to me. And I think that's how I got connected to you guys, was he had mentioned you in an email. So he kind of sent me your way. So I needed to reach out, make some more connections in the ag ed podcasting field.
So, well, thanks for thinking of us. We appreciate that, because, well, as those of you who are listening, it up as we go. But we really appreciate the connection, and hopefully, you know, provide support to you as you journey into your own classroom. So
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely listened to a few of your guys' episodes to kind of get a foundation of knowledge on a variety of different topics. So I always appreciate that. One of the things I have been really interested in, though, is that, so I started my podcast about 3.5 years ago. And when I started mine, I could not find any other ag ed podcasts. I mean, like, I looked like for a while. At that point, there was hardly any podcasts in general about ag. Like, there was The Future of Agriculture with Tim. I'm sure you guys know Tim. His last name's escaping me. Anyways, he runs Future of Ag. There's a couple like ag. There's like the Ag Report. There was a couple other like ag news or ag media based podcasts, but not a lot of ag education. And so I kind of started mine up, and then like within the past year or two, you know, especially when everything first shut down, they were just popping up like weeds. Like, I've been seeing so many ag ed podcasts pop up everywhere, and it's been really cool. But that's why I was curious about your guys' experience with ag ed podcasts versus mine, because there's a lot of them that I haven't really gotten to connect with. And it sounds like you guys have a bit more connections than I do in that regard.
yeah, so we started in June of 2020. But prior to that, and I'm interested if this is the same process for you. Breanna and I tossed around starting a podcast for well over a year. And this is how it went. I would text her, hey, we should start a podcast. She would reply, no, like, we don't have time, or do we even know what we're doing? I'm like, yeah, you're right. And then a month would go by. And then I get a text from Breanna, hey, Nikki, we should start a podcast. And then I would be the one like, no, we can't do that. Like, no one would listen. We were our worst enemies. And it was actually, well, pandemic hit, right? And so we were missing those connections. And my niece is in the 3rd grade. She has her own YouTube channel. And at that point, I looked at Breanna and I was like, if my niece can play Minecraft on YouTube and have, like, we need to channel that confidence. Like, if a 3rd grader can do this, what do we have to lose? And we started it. And so we, at that point, listened. I mean, we were podcast listeners. We love true crime, so we listened to true crime podcasts. Breanna has a lot of others she listens to. I dabbled in other educational podcasts, and so we frequently listened. But you're right, there wasn't a ton out there for ag education. And so we just, those people that know us, we jump in with 2 feet and we ask questions later. And so that's how it started. Mm-hmm. I don't know, Breanna, what do you got to add? Like, then Here by the Owl podcast was born.
Yeah, well, and I think it has been really cool too to see more and more ag teachers come out with their own podcasts and how they take their own creative spin on it, and getting to listen to them and support them along the way. I can't remember the statistic, but I heard a statistic one time about podcasting, and it was a really high percentage of people that start a podcast end up only making it past like 3 episodes, and that's it. So when we do see new like ag ed ones specifically pop up, I think it's really important to support, because like we know how hard it is, and there's definitely a need for ag education podcasts and agriculture podcasts in general too, to get the word out. So that's what we've been
and doing. We listen to them. We truly do. We don't see them as competition. They truly are like, we're sharing episodes, we're listening to them. and there have been countless ag teacher podcasts where we have both taken something away from it and used it in our own classrooms, or knew somebody like, hey, like this is a topic like I heard that you needed help with, like share it with them. And so like we're cheering them on. I think that's a TikTok or something. Like if I TikToked, I would probably know. But like we really are cheering them on because it helps ag education, and that's what we want. So
yeah, no, I'm 100% with you guys. I had a little bit of a different origin story than you did, but I
probably
ended
far more official than ours.
not
We got
necessarily more
advice from a
official.
third grader, so
So I started my podcast back in April of 2018. So I'm coming up on 4 years now. And I started it 2 months before I graduated from high school, and it was like a week before state conference, California state conference. And I was kind of like in a weird, like I had just decided I wanted to be an ag teacher, and like my teachers had been pushing me for like a year at this point to do it. And I was like, no, like I don't want to be a teacher. That's not really my thing. And then at this point I had been coaching my, fellow students in showmanship for 3 years. And I didn't really consider that teaching, because I was just showing them how to take care of their animals. And they were like, kid, like, what are you doing? You're teaching these kids how to raise animals, and you don't think you're gonna be a good teacher? Like, so I kind of took it a little more seriously, and I started doing research on how to be a teacher. And so that's what kind of brought me into like the podcasting realm. I'd always kind of listened to them just for general updates on, ag news. I listened to some comedy podcasts, some, more like educational podcasts, but in different areas. Like I've always been a big nerd for like animals of all sorts. So I listened to like podcasts about like zoos and about like, exotic animals and stuff. And so I started doing research on podcasts, so like my mom recommended I do this, and I pushed it off for like months. I was like, no, that's dumb. I'm not doing that. Then a few months later, I was like,
your mom's idea. And then you're like, oh, my mom had this idea.
Pretty much. She was like, hey, you should start a podcast. I was like, that's dumb. A few months later, I was like, hey mom, I'm going to start a podcast. And she was like, wow, who would have thunk it? And so I started it, and I had two co-hosts when I started. They're two friends of mine that were in school with me, and I was like pushing them. I was like, guys, we have to get this started. And they were the ones that were kind of like, no, like let's just push it off. I was like, you guys are moving away to college in 3 months. Like I cannot do this by myself. I need you guys to help me. And so we started it. We got through our first few episodes, and then I started interviewing like other guests, and then they moved off to college, and I took over the podcast full time by myself. So for the first 2 years of the podcast, all I did was interview farmers and professionals in the ag industry, which was great, but it wasn't quite hitting the audience I wanted it to hit, because my intended audience was the general public, people who didn't come from ag backgrounds, and they weren't going to look for my podcast. I had to find a way to bring it to them. And so around the time everything shut down, I was like really, really close to quitting my podcast. And I stumbled upon some online communities that were of new podcasters. And I found out that there was just like this massive boom of new podcasts, ag podcasts, and, true crime and comedy and educational. And like, there's just, everyone was making podcasts. And so I made a bunch of friends in the community from different genres, and we started doing some crossovers. And I started to realize just how much of an audience is out there in the non-ag sphere. And then I kind of reinvented my podcast into a show that doesn't interview farmers anymore, but now I interview people who come from more urban backgrounds. And I find ways to relate ag to them in different media forms. So I do like, where ag is present in movies, where ag is present in video games, how ag relates to this thing or that thing, or talk about technology, or, what ag jobs are not considered ag jobs, like computer science, or, so kind of, a different approach to it for sure. But it's been working. And over the past almost 2 years now, I've kind of evolved it into something very different than it originally was, but I'm much more satisfied with it now than where it was when I started it. So a little bit of a different approach, but similar kind of growing pains. You go through that first step of like trying to figure out like, what do I want to do with this? And then you kind of get there and you're like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. I'm glad I did this.
We joked one time that we were going to record us listening to our first podcast and just laugh about where we came from. I mean, in all reality, we recorded that first episode in Breanna's office, and then we recorded like the next one in her house. And at that point, we're like, what else can we talk about? Like, it just took one, and we were so awkward. It was so cringy.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
like,
weren't really
how do we start it?
Yeah,
Like,
we weren't sure how we were gonna structure it either. Like, we had all these like big plans, like, 2 episodes a week, and one's gonna be this, and one's gonna be that, and then, I would say it took us, a month or two to kind of settle into it and realize like what we actually wanted. But I think we're always changing and evolving and looking for what's next and how we can make our podcast fit the needs of our listeners.
Yeah. And our overall goal is always to have fun. And if at whatever point, and I think if you were about to quit your podcast, you probably felt this. If there's ever a point where we no longer love it, then it's time. Like it's maybe time to step back, do less with it, or be done. And so right now we still love it. And that's our goal. It's a hobby, and we want to still make it fun for us. And yeah.
No, definitely. And I'm on a similar policy that you guys are, in that I've always from day one said, because, we talked about this before the episode, but, it's never been about the money. It's never been like a project that's going to make, millions. You're never going to get famous from it kind of thing. It's always been a pretty like, just kind of fun side project to do that may help some people. And if it does, then great. If it doesn't, then it was fun while it lasted kind of thing.
Yeah.
I had the same approach starting out, and I to this day still have the same approach. But I was starting to see other podcasters, around me in that community do something similar, where they were like, yeah, I'm gonna join it, and I'm, gonna have fun. And then they get so caught up in like I haven't uploaded this week, I have to edit all this stuff, and like they're just like so like overworked and burnt out on it that they're just not enjoying it anymore. And that tends to be kind of where that statistic comes from about, most podcasters don't make it past episode 3. I actually had friends that had really, really solid ideas for episodes and for podcasts, and they get started and then they just kind of fall short of it because they just, they weren't having fun with it. And, I sat a few of them down because I was doing like a mini podcasting consulting service. Not that I'm a professional by any means, but for some reason people listen to me. And I basically told them, like, guys, are you having fun with this? And if you're not, then why are you still doing it? Like, this isn't your long-term career goal. So there's nothing keeping you here, take a break from it, come back to you if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that. I had to take many breaks from my show before I kind of like finally settled into where I was comfortable with it. And, I went through the same kind of stuff. Like, I started off super ambitious with like, okay, one episode is going to be interview. The next week we're going to do FFA, kid is going to be on it. And the next week we're going to do like an industry showcase. And then like, I kind of got to a point where I was like, it'd be kind of fun to do that one week. Oh, that'd be kind of fun to do that one week. And then it just kind of started transforming into something else over time. So it's kind of funny how podcasts have to kind of show you what they want to be. You're not allowed to just tell them what they're going to be.
Right. Well, and something that's maintainable too. Like, no one else can see us on Zoom here, but you're sitting there with your fancy equipment. We don't have any fancy equipment.
No.
We don't do any editing. Like, it's just real because we don't have the time or the skill level to do it. And I
like negative amounts.
But for us to be able to continue to do ours, we know that we can't do that because it's not something that's sustainable for us.
Yeah, and we get a lot of people that reach out, ag teachers with students who want to start podcasts, post-secondary students that want to start podcasts. Yeah, and they're always like, what do you use? And we're like, the free pandemic Zoom account. We are riding that until that leaves. But I don't, and it's just not, like Breanna said, it's not sustainable. And you got to stick to what is comfortable and what's going to keep you loving what you're doing, because you want listeners to love what they're listening to. And if you're not in love with what you're providing, then they're not going to be in love with listening. And so I also think there are no rules to podcasting. Like, no one's calling us up and be like, oh my gosh, this episode's too long, or you should have introduced this episode differently. No, there's no rules. So we make it up as we go, and we keep it fun for ourselves and our listeners and our guests. And we hope that's, you can tell that when you're listening, because that's what's important. And we just don't have time or the skill level. Like, I'm lucky I know how to operate the computer, let alone no editing. Like, we tell people before we start, do not share something you don't want. And I always say the world, which is funny because the world's not listening. They could listen, but don't say anything that you don't want the world to hear, because we are not going to edit it. Why? Because we don't want to. Like, it takes a lot of time. You edit your podcast. We don't. So when we hit record and we hit end, it's all in there.
No,
like, we would rather start over than edit. Like, that's how bad we don't want to edit. So
no, I'm with you. I have a strict policy on my show that I have a full transparency policy. So when I edit for sound quality, but I don't cut anything. So like, I have, people on here that, they'll say something like, "Ooh, you can cut that out later, right?" I'm like, no, it's staying in there. Sorry. Like,
we don't even edit for sound quality. So it is what it is. Zoom glitches and all, it's all in there. Dogs in the background, babies crying. You get us for what we are, and we hope that people love that.
Yeah.
If not, just hit next or turn on some
millions of other podcasts out there, and I'm convinced there's one for everyone, or one for every topic.
Yeah,
there really is. Yeah, no, it's crazy. I've had people, another podcasting friend of mine that's like, so like, "Oh, you use that mic? Like that mic's terrible." It's like, okay, well, my episodes sound exactly the same as yours, and I spend 10 less hours editing them than you do. So really, like, what's better here? So like, I'm not a big, like, I've been using this mic since I started. I got it on sale for a Christmas deal, and it's been phenomenal. Like, I am very much the budget podcaster. Like, I use Anchor, I use my, Audacity, all that kind of fun stuff. Like, I'm on the same boat of, it's not how expensive, it's not how much money you put into it, it's how much, love and effort and time you put into it. And again, it's how much fun you have with it, right?
Right. You can have all the fanciest equipment in the world and spend hundreds of dollars, but if you're not, you're passionate about it, then it's not going to be real anyways.
Right. No, exactly.
Well, we make up for fancy equipment with the fancy guests we have.
That's right. So that brings me to a topic. I had a friend on last week that him and I just kind of sat and we had a little like podcast reflection day. This episode will go up way after that one does, but him and I had a fun conversation about like what some of the most fun or most exciting guests we've had on have been. So I'm curious, what have been your guys' like most exciting or most fun guests?
Oh my gosh. We've been asked this before and we like freeze every single time. What is our favorite? Breanna, do you know? You go.
I was just gonna say, you asked that question and then like we immediately forget every guest that we've ever had.
Yes, podcast. Exactly. Like, who are the guests? What's our podcast name? I'm like literally searching our podcast. Well, Jason, obviously. No.
He will be listening to this, so just so you guys know. But
definitely it's Jason then. It's so Jason. Okay. Well, actually, I'm going to put a group of people. Okay. And Jason is one of them. So, Breanna, pick a different one. We both are National FFA Teacher Ambassadors. So, our job as an ambassador is to take content that National FFA has created and disseminate that and help ag teachers around the country use it. And so we have used our podcast to showcase those teachers. Jason is one of them. And so that's really cool because they're taking the resources that are created by National FFA and highlighting how they use them in their classroom. So that's just really fun because although they are serving in the same capacity, every single one comes with a different resource and they always have fun spins on how to modify it and change it for your classroom and increase engagement. And the best part about it is these resources are available to every ag teacher, but it's just fun to see like the magic they create with something and bring paper to life. So Breanna, what's your favorite?
Yeah, so I have a couple different groups, I guess. So my first, kind of like Nikki said, in our role as National FFA Teacher Ambassadors, we we get to know National FFA staff on, I feel like, a more personal level than a lot of people get. So those people have been really fun to have on the podcast to talk about different things National FFA is doing, because I don't think the average teacher really gets to have that connection. And all of those people with National FFA are great. So any teacher that reaches out to them, they're definitely willing to help. But I think there's sometimes a disconnect. So that's been really fun to have them on. And then I think, just kind of going back to our roots, I think it's been really fun to have a lot of North Dakota ag teachers on there, ones that we've been looking up to forever. I think about Ryan Schneider, he's a legend in North Dakota ag ed, and one that I looked up to when I was a member myself. And I've also had my own ag teacher on the podcast, and I think that one was really fun for me too, just to get to highlight all the awesome things that she's doing and our other ag teacher friends in North Dakota are doing too.
Yeah, good point. They're all so good. How do you decide?
Well, if they weren't good, I hope they wouldn't be guests, right? That's the whole point. But
That's true.
No, that's I definitely can see where you're coming from. It's hard to pick a favorite guest or a favorite episode. Especially when they have like such different criteria. I mean, like one of my favorite interviews of all time was my ag teacher, Mr. Coolwine. He's actually my first interview. He was the one that was like the biggest supporter of the podcast. To this day, it's still my most successful episode.
I just love, like, your podcast is so old. I mean, old in podcast terms. And I don't know. I just think what a cool message to have your ag teacher like cheering you on and as a guest. And let me tell you, we have to hype ourselves up, because sometimes we ask these people and we're nervous as hell, like, to be like, can you be on our podcast, to people that we truly idolize. And so then before we're like, okay, we can do this, like, keep it together, because we truly are like impacted and inspired by these people. And I just think it's so cool that the start of your podcast, like a main pillar was your ag teacher.
Yeah, and he was like, I brought the idea to him, and he was like so Coolline was one of those that was very much like a, wasn't impressed by much kind of ag teacher. He had to like really work hard to impress him. I walked up to him, I was like, Coolline, I'm doing this podcast, I want you to be my first guest. And he was like, that's amazing, I want to be on it immediately. So that was really cool. And he was like my big mentor, the one that really pushed me into teaching ag, into being an exempt coach, into doing the podcast in the first place and kind of really rolling with it. He was a big inspiration. So that was a cool one. One of my favorite episodes, just in terms of it being really fun and kind of colorful and really, have a lot of personality there, was an episode I did with a friend of mine that I made through the podcasting community. And her and I did a whole episode, like an hour-long episode on agriculture and Star Wars. And that was just funny because we spent like the whole hour just arguing about, okay, that would work. No, it wouldn't because of this. And, like just going back and forth on like, the logistics of farming in a fictional world. So that one was kind of fun. But I'd say my most impressive episode in terms of who I got as a guest was my Temple Grandin interview for sure.
Oh, that's cool.
That one was
now I need to go listen to those episodes.
I was just going to say, pause this so we can go listen. No, I think any podcaster has to have like a wish list of people they want on there. And we started that wish list right away.
Yeah.
And we achieved them all. And but we keep adding. And that's what's fun about it, is because we keep seeing teachers do amazing things. And there's always those people that we idolize. And what's fun is when people come to us with their ideas, because we hope that we're showcasing to them, here's a platform to help teachers. And so we love when they come to us saying like, I have an idea, can I share it on your podcast? Yes, like please, because it's just that connection piece. And so by no means are we like the best podcast or the most popular or have the most listens, but dang it, we have fun, and that's what matters.
Well, and one of our fellow ag teachers always says his favorite lesson is the one that he's currently teaching. And I think that's kind of like with us too, like our favorite guest or our favorite episode is the one that we're currently recording. On Sunday, we're recording with an ag teacher who makes TikToks, and I'm really excited about that. So like maybe that's going to be my next favorite episode until the next week when we record with 2 other people. So
yeah.
That's awesome. No, I did the TikTok thing for a little while. It actually got more popular than my podcast, which was pretty fun. But I haven't posted in like probably almost a year, so I need to get back into that. But TikTok's a hit or miss kind of thing.
Brianna's a TikToker. I am not. But the
I'm
best
a TikTok
part is
watcher. I am not.
Oh yes, that's true. There are 2 types of TikTokers.
Yes.
She watches, but it's just cool because we literally get to open the door of someone's passion, and it's just fabulous that we get to help share that.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if it's not our passions, but let me tell you, there are a ton of times where our own episodes have like drafted our lesson plans and we're taking notes as people are writing. And there are countless times where we've recorded, gotten done, and continued to ask our own selfish questions because we really are into it. So I don't know. It's been great PD for us. Too bad we can't get like credits and, you know, a whole degree because of our PD that we've done with ourselves. But yeah.
That's awesome. No, that's
most
super
of the time we don't even do like people are like, what do I wear? Like can't like we look decent now because we came from work. We normally record on Sunday nights. I don't know why we've ever fallen on that day. Seriously, we literally make things up. We've just kind of chosen Sunday nights because Friday didn't seem right. Most people are doing things Saturdays, and we're a lot of our teachers. And so it's like, well, we might as well share the Sunday scaries together. And we don't have makeup on, and we haven't done our hair, and we probably haven't showered. Like for real, we don't look good when we podcast. And so people are always like, do I turn my camera on? Like I don't look good today. Like, I'm sorry. I'm like, you look better. Like anybody that's ever said we don't, like, heads up, I'm not gonna look good, we always look way worse. So yeah.
That's awesome. No, I definitely, I mean, and that's another thing too that always cracks me up. I've had some like older farmers or even like some of my older ag teachers on the show. One of my earliest, actually my first ag teacher, the first ag teacher I was exposed to, Mr. Dave Catano, he told me, like, because I asked him to be on a show on an episode right before I graduated, and he was like, so how does this work? Do I have to have like a camera set up, or do I have to, and it was in his classroom. Like it wasn't even like over a Zoom call. And he was like, do I need to have like a whole like film crew come in here? Like what's going to be the operation here? And I was like, see this microphone, talk to it. That's all you got to do. And he was like, well, I don't know these radio broadcast thingies. I don't know how podcasts work. And so I've definitely run into my fair share of people who are very like paranoid or like, you know, scared of the idea of the podcast, without realizing it's just 2 people talking or 3 people talking.
Yeah. We always refer to it as like, it's like an Instagram story or like a Snapchat, like, except for it goes longer and then someone responds, you know, like it's simple.
Yeah. No, exactly. So, and I kind of wanted to highlight something kind of interesting that I've noticed with the ag ed podcast industry, I guess you could say. Are we an industry yet? Are we big enough to be an industry?
Hell yeah, we're an industry. I don't know what considers an industry, but let's go with it.
All right. We're a genre at the very least. But no, one of the cool things I've noticed, and something we talked about before, is that every ag ed podcast I've listened to has a different audience type and a different like message for that audience. So like you guys are for ag teachers, you're building resources to build better ag teachers, which help students. There are FFA chapters that are dedicated just to their chapter. There are ag ed podcasts just for FFA students. There are ag ed podcasts just for you know, college professors. There, you know, like there's all over the place. Mine is just for the general public, but more specifically kind of the general public in like the mid-20s age range, that's like, you know, early parenthood, kind of like they're starting to get curious about what they should be feeding their children, kind of is for some reason why I did not choose this audience, but that's the audience that chose me, and I'm happy to accept them. But no, it's like, you know, we all have different goals in mind, you know, like everyone's like, well, I want to teach people. Okay, well, what people do you want to teach? You know, like I'm trying to teach just people who missed the boat in FFA and now they're, you know, adults and they're trying to figure out what food is. And, you have podcasts that are focusing on the kids before they hit FFA, and you have the kids that are in FFA, and then you have the kids who have to take care of the kids in FFA. And then you have, so there's like so many different levels to ag education that I think kind of gets overlooked with how, how scarce we are. We kind of have that ability to be so diverse in our messages.
Yeah. It's really fun because we frequent other people's podcasts all the time. And I guess I hope they listen to ours, too, but we learn something from them. And, I just think it just grows like the library of resources for those teachers. So, I was just scrolling through, to highlight a few because they're great people. The NAE Connect podcast, Owl Tales podcast, Two Ohio Owls, Owl Pellets, which is more research based, but if you're nerdy, they have fabulous things. I shouldn't say even nerdy; they're just really good. Green and Growing Education podcast. What am I missing, Breanna?
I think those are kind of the main.
Shout out to our friends. Great job.
But yeah, I mean, our kind of audience, it seems like what we have is primarily female, or more female than male, and kind of in that 20 to 35 age range, kind of similar to what you were saying. I mean, obviously, mostly ag teachers. I think there's a few other rogue people who listen to some, but mostly ag teachers, because we've created it with content for ag teachers and interview mostly ag teachers and stuff like that. But
yeah, I had to go to Spotify now. Unorthodox Owl from Pack to Parliament. Yeah, I think
and
those are
mostly just like the FFA/advisor style podcast too. I mean,
right. Dairyland
connected...
Owls, By the Owl. It's a Missouri ag teacher one. Yeah, I mean, and you're right. They really have taken their own spin on what the needs are. Some of them are very specific to their state, which is okay. Because there are no rules in podcasting. And if they have an audience, like you said, if they're meeting the needs of an audience, then they're killing it. And we're here for that. Even if they're specific to their state, there's still great things to glean while listening. And so we love supporting them. And if there's more people out there that want to start a podcast that's like ours, we would happily sit down with you and help you start. Because that's what it's all about.
I remember when I started my podcast, a buddy of mine, I guess you can call him a buddy, an acquaintance of mine, heard I was doing it, and he approached me and he was like, "Hey, so are you gonna make a bunch of money off of this? Are you gonna get famous off of this?" And I was like, "Probably not." And he was like, "So like, what if somebody else tries to like steal your idea and tries to start their own?" I'm like, "Good. I hope they do." He's like, "What do you mean that's competition?" I'm like, "No, that's more people spreading the word. That's what that is, And so like he didn't get it because he was a 17-year-old kid that was looking for any chance to get money. But no, it's absolutely like one of the big things that I've begun to realize. Just to now it's my turn to shout out a few of my friends. I have met some other ag ed podcasters that focus a little bit more on kind of what I'm doing with the more like general public / research team based, podcast style. You have like North American Ag, you have United We Ag, there's a couple other ones that are more focused on kind of reaching outside of what the traditional FFA podcast is going to be reaching. But instead of, every podcast competing for the attention of the FFA kids, we're almost building this massive usable network now that anyone in ag education can pull from for anything they might need for their ag classes, for a discovery program, to even start a program, especially using your guys' resources, to teach, their neighbor, their best friend, their parents, like the resources are so available because we've made a careful job to not try to knock each other out of the competition, but instead try to work together and, build this massive archive, or I think you called it a library of, potential to use for, ag education. So I think that's kind of cool. We're able to do that almost without even communicating with each other first.
Yeah, when I think now more than ever, it's really important to advocate for agriculture and tell the story and get the word out about like educated ways of how agriculture works and why we do the things that we do. And I think podcasting is just the new platform for that, because more and more people are listening to podcasts and getting their information from it. I know a lot of ag teachers too that actually use podcasts in their classroom and have students listen to certain episodes and fill out maybe a sheet as they go along, or even having their students create their own, quote unquote podcast episode based on a topic that they're discovering in class. So I think all of those are really important ways to, like I said, get the word out. And yeah, I mean, we support anyone who's out here doing their own podcast, and we'll help anyone along the way, because um, it is important, and they're not competition. It's not like maybe a comedy podcast where you're competing against each other, but yeah, just supporting each other along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for us, recruitment and retention is an effort that is really important to us. And although we have no backing to determine if our podcast is helping with those things, but we know that younger people are listening to our podcast. That's, when we look at our analytics, that's what we see. So we're hoping that those younger teachers who just are trying to get their footing in ag education are getting something from our podcast that help them in their career, because we want them to stay as ag teachers. And so, although not an intention of ours, but we celebrate Teach Ag Day, and anytime we can talk about why we love what we do, we do, and we hope that it's shared. And so, yes, our intended audience isn't people who aren't ag teachers. There are some that listen that aren't, but we hope that pre-service teachers and young teachers are getting that support, so we retain them in the profession, because there's a dire need for ag teachers across the nation.
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that shortage pretty hard over here, as well. Like my education department is much bigger than it's ever been, and we're still, struggling to get teachers together. So no, I definitely have seen much more of a push, and there's a lot of interest in ag communications, which I think is great, but we're still trying to find that way to get people back into the classroom. And I think really, exposing kind of what the classroom consists of and some of the fun aspects of teaching ag is, one of the more effective ways of doing so. I mean, I've actually been able to convince a few of my friends that ag education might be a potential route for them, just because they didn't realize just how much goes into being an ag teacher. And yes, it's a lot of work, but there's a lot of payoff to it. There's nothing like that, that moment where you see that light bulb click in a kid's eyes, or you see that fire lit behind them when they get really excited about a topic. Like it's, it adds such value that, people don't appreciate until they see it, like, so it's something that I think is very, like, when I started my podcast, I had the intention of using it as a tool in my classroom when I started teaching, and I still do. But I think that now it can almost serve a greater purpose of connecting people to each other to get a stronger form of information that anyone can use for any of their classrooms, not just mine. Which I think is ultimately, the best goal for ag ed is, get those resources as widespread as possible, so we can keep having people come in and say, hey, look, it's not as scary to be an ag teacher. We have 10 podcasts right here that can tell you exactly how to do it, and what to avoid and what's good. And, are you doing it right? Are you messing up? Like, it's like Breanna said, there's a podcast for just about everything these days. So it's, there's really no excuse not to at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. So, I mean, that kind of wraps up all the thoughts I had. I don't know if you guys had anything else you wanted to add, or any other comments or anything.
Well, for any of your listeners, we would love for you to follow along with us. If the things that we talk about are of interest to you, so you can like Here by the Owl podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and maybe you're someone that's thinking, you know what, I have something to offer ag teachers, and you want to be a guest. We would love to have you on our podcast and to share your passion. And we thank you for having us with you today, and sharing our passion of our podcast, and really highlighting that although we might not know what we're doing, we're still doing something, and it's been really fun. So
Yeah, it's been awesome to get to chat with you and share our passion for podcasting. And I guess I would say, too, for anyone listening, even if you're not interested in ag education per se, maybe if you've been thinking about starting your own podcast, like this is the sign you're looking for, just to go ahead and do it. And Nikki and I just jumped right in, and we've been loving it for, since 2020. So if you're thinking about it, just go ahead and do it.
Awesome. Well, for anyone who wants to listen to your podcast, where would be the best place for them to find that?
Here by the Owl podcast is available on any podcast platform. So if you search Here by the Owl podcast and subscribe, you'll get notified with all of our episodes that we drop.
Great. Well, yeah, I'll be sure to put all your links and all your information down in the description so people can go find you and share all your stuff around. If I'm not mistaken, you guys do have stickers and other memorabilia available. Is that right?
Yeah, Breanna, shout out our stickers.
Yeah, so we created some podcast stickers originally just kind of for fun, thinking no one would want them. And I feel like there's been, a relative amount of hype around them as far as, ag teachers go. But we are currently selling them on our Etsy store, Here by the Owl podcast. And all the proceeds from those stickers are going to go to buy ag teacher planners for pre-service teachers. So we really wanted to find a way to support them and really kind of introduce them and welcome them into the profession. And that's kind of the route we're going right now with that.
Yeah. So find us on Etsy at Here by the Owl podcast. Till the end of the month, our goal is to sell. It was in celebration of our 100th episode. And so we're trying to sell 100 stickers. So even if you don't need the stickers, you can go on there and buy them. We will send you a handwritten note with love all the way from North Dakota with the stickers, but know that money is truly helping the next generation of our ag teachers. And as we said, they're so important to our profession. It's our way to give back. So we will not be keeping any of the money. We don't make any money on our podcast. And we really just want to give back to our profession that we love so much. So
awesome. Well, as someone who's going to be an ag teacher, I appreciate all the things you guys do for us.
Well, we're excited for you to become an ag teacher. And if there's anything that we can do for you, in the classroom, questions, you need resources that are not even podcast specific, we want to help you in your journey to be an ag teacher. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I'm definitely be using your resources and knocking on your door for more at some point in the future. So thank you guys so much for joining me. It was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will again link all your stuff down in the description so they can go find you and go check out your awesome podcast. I know I have some ag teachers that listen to my show, so I'm sure they already have found yours. If they haven't, then hopefully they will now, or share them around with their ag teacher friends. But yeah, so thanks you guys so much again. And I think that covers everything. So if you guys don't have anything else, I'll go ahead and close out the episode. So thanks to all the listeners for tuning in and for all the support over the past now 4 years, which is crazy to think about. It's been a lot of fun and it's been a wild ride, but I hope to catch you all next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer. And that's all she wrote. That was this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again, Breanna and Nikki, for being such great guests in this episode. I hope you all enjoyed their stories and hearing about their come to fame in terms of podcasting. Be sure to go check out the Here by the Owl podcast. The link will be down in the description below, wherever you're listening, so that you can tune in and see what they've got going on. It's a great show. I still enjoy listening to it, and I hope that you will as well. But that is all I have for you for this week. So don't forget to like and comment and subscribe and share and do all the things that we always say you do. And then once again, make sure you share not just online, but with your friends and family around the dinner table. But that's all I have for you. So thank you so much for tuning in. Hope to catch you next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.